Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Passionate Youth Worker Podcast. Today's conversation promises to be a source of inspiration and insight as we delve into the life journey of Benedetto Zanca from Maryland here in the United States. Ben's a beacon of guidance for young people and fellow youth workers alike. Armed with the law degree that he earned in England, he chose a path driven by passion over self-interest, dedicating himself to empowering others to become the best versions of themselves as a life coach. In this episode, Ben will share how his own life experiences serve as a driving force behind his selfless commitment to others. His choice to embrace a path of self-service. Let me start that over. In this episode, Ben will share how his own life experiences serve as the driving force behind his selfless commitment to others. His choice to embrace a path of service reflects a deep-seated desire to make a meaningful impact. Join us as we uncover the layers of Ben's story, a life marked by humility, faith, and an unwavering joy derived from helping. Together, let's dive into his story and discover the types of lessons he has to share. So let's meet him. Ben, thanks for being a guest on the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Paul.
You're very welcome. I am so eager to dive into your story, so let's just jump right in. I'd like to go to the very beginning. And as we were getting to know each other, you shared with me one of the first things you said is that you were raised by your mother alone, and your father wasn't really in your life. Can you talk about what kind of impact that had on you?
Yes, growing up as without a dad, I didn't know it had an impact until I became a youth, seeing other kids. Um, I saw how much I missed, and I didn't even know I had that anger, even though I didn't express it so much. But when I became a youth, I saw that I had that anger, and I didn't understand why until later on when I studied psychology. It's just the absence of father by himself. So I had that hurt, pain, anger, and it did impact me a lot. And even though my mom did everything she could to provide for me, it's just the absence of father. Uh, there were so many things that I missed in life because I didn't have a father.
Yeah. Would you be willing to share, like, why did your dad leave? Do you understand his intent and what he was trying to do when he wasn't there to help raise you like your mother did?
It was never. I met my dad only like 5 times in my life, and he never really shared. The only thing he mentioned was blaming this and that, so it was never a tangible answer or, there was no substance to it. So it's just that he didn't get along with my mom and her mom, and that's it. But it was never a real for me. Every time I analyze it, try to figure out, it just didn't make sense. But he probably didn't want to tell me. And the same thing with mom. I never really asked her because I saw how much pain she had, raising me without, a husband by herself. So I didn't really want to ask her because I feel still until this day, I feel like I would cause her more pain if I ask her, if I want her, to go back, revisit that time of her life. So I still couldn't figure it out. Uh,
Wow. You're still being very selfless about that whole thing. You don't want to provide anybody discomfort. Are you still harboring that anger, or have you learned to come to terms with it and being able to kind of move on?
I actually moved on, even though that void, that pain, that hurt is still there. But there was um, a verse from the Bible that say, "Honor your mother and father." And then when I understood it, it just hit me. It said, "Regardless, regardless." It doesn't say because he was a good person, because he did this for you, he did that for. No, it's not. It's just because he's just my father. But by the time I understood that, he was already dead. So I couldn't even, say anything or reconcile with them in a way that, could have brought healing for both of us. But I did, without him, even though still, I did reconcile it. And I don't have anything, towards him. I had to, forgive myself, ask for forgiveness for holding those things against him. And then I had to move on.
Wow. Well, I'm sorry to hear about your father, that he passed away and you never had that chance. But it sounds like, based on everything I know about you, you have turned that into some sort of passion to helping other people. But let's talk about your mom. Your mom sounds like a fabulous person. She obviously raised you with the right values and the right morals. Let the audience know about your mom a little bit.
My mom was a very dedicated person in every aspect of her life, and integrity meant a lot for her. So she was a person uh, who showed me the values in life with her action. She didn't say much. So if she wants to discipline me, I would know. That's the only time, not a few
She
times
didn't
that
hide
she,
that part.
yeah, she
Yeah.
would talk to me. But other than that, the values she instilled in me, caring for others, loving others, and being, uh, authentic, right? Regardless what you go through in life, it's still you. She showed me in her actions. So she was that anchor in my life. I didn't even know. Um, I thought all women, for instance, all moms were like that. I didn't know because she covered both sides for me. And I didn't feel that um, she did everything, and she gave me that strength. Whatever challenges I went through, for instance, after I left, I was a teenager when I left home. It gave me that strength. I saw her all the time, regardless whatever was thrown at her, she would still bounce back and move on. She never looked back, and she never said, "This happened to me. Why did this happen to me? Why am I still here?" She's just moving on. So whatever happened to me, whatever challenges I encountered even as a youth, I always remembered that, and then just move on. I just could see her, you know, bouncing back and moving on. So it did help me a lot, and she instilled those values in me.
She sounds like a remarkable person that is super strong and really grounded in her values and her morals, because she raised a son that is doing wonderful things for young people and youth workers alike. Is your mother still with us? Do you get to see her much, and do you share those kind of insights with her?
I speak with her often, but she's not here in the US. But I speak with her often, and I tell her what I do, and I can't hear that she's surprised. She still can't believe that I'm where I am now, um, because of what where I came from. It's just for her. It's just she doesn't have words most of the time. It's just I could hear it. It's just every time I tell her what I did or what I'm doing. Um, it's just for her. It's just she doesn't have any words. She still can't believe it. But I think she is grateful. She's happy that what I'm doing for other people. Um, the the one thing about her, there was another person, is a distant relative who grew up in our house after I left. She took him there, raised him, and he became a very successful person. And she never discussed, she never told anyone about him. And one day when she was somewhere, he came to her and say hi. He said "mom" to her, and everybody was like, "Wow, you know this person?" And then she said she didn't understand why people were saying that to her, and they were taking pictures of her with him. And then yeah, he told her that he became this person, and she was shocked. But that's the kind of person she is. She did a lot for other people, and she doesn't even talk about it.
Yeah, it sounds like that has rubbed off on you as well. And you grew up in Ethiopia. Can you, in a nutshell, kind of describe what your childhood was like there? And then when did you move away from Ethiopia?
My childhood, as a child, when I remember it now, it was very spontaneous. I really loved it. It was uh, there were so many things that I didn't have, but I didn't think I didn't have those things because I was so happy. There's with nothing we had life.
Mhm.
With so many good friends. good, people with good values and with very loving people. They never said anything about me not having a father or being this person. I was always embraced as one of their own. So that's the memory I have until, I left home and, when I was a teenager, then I saw the difference. But growing up there, even though there was that poverty, right? Um, it's I always say to people, like, yeah, I was born in the poorest country in the world. And from that part, still, it was the poorest part of that country. But it's just what I remember about is completely different.
Hmm.
It's not that I think it's she managed to give me the best she could. So uh, there was that challenge, but it was also mentally for me and emotionally, it was really healthy.
I think it's amazing how, uh, if we look at life and consider the things we were given, often we can really count all the blessings we had in front of us. It's easy to forget that and judge us and compare ourselves to other people. But when we ground ourselves into really what our life was like, it sounds like we can come to terms with it and realize that it was pretty good. And I'm got to believe you just were raised by the entire village, and everybody around you just supported you and cared for you and looked out for you. And your mother was just that central figure. She sounds like an incredible person. So, in when you were an adolescent, it sounds like, or when you were older, you moved away. Where did you go, and why did you leave this? Sounds like a nice place.
First, I moved to Italy. The reason why I moved is I didn't want to move from there. The people who were very close to me, they were like my family, right? Brother and sisters. They got a diversity lottery, right? The DV, and moved out here in the US. So I was like by myself. I thought they were my, especially the brother who was like my twin. And I didn't have, after they left, I was like, there is nothing to do for me. It's just
Mm.
some things, has been taken away from me. So I wanted to do everything I could to be with them again. So first I went to Italy. I lived there for a while, and I didn't really like it. It wasn't the same as having, them. And it's just, it was different. That's where I had my relatives. So I came back here, and I reunited with them here in the US. And then that was good, and I was so happy at that time. But it didn't work out as we planned it. It was the US. It was different. I didn't know how people would, because I didn't have a family, right? Even though we're still with them, so I had to go back to Europe because here it's just I couldn't continue the education I wanted. So I went back to Italy, and then I went to London. That's where I lived most of my life and got my education there.
Oh, yeah. And it's an impressive portfolio of degrees you have. And you took that and decided to give it back to other people, which sounds like a lot like what your mother would do and the values that she instilled in you. Believe it or not, we have to take a short break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about your humility, faith, and the joy that you get from helping people. So we'll be right back. Ben, right before the break, I was talking about your humility and faith and what you get out of helping people. I could see where your humility comes from. It sounds like it comes directly from your mother, uh, and I am amazed that when we get to know our podcast guests, one of the questions I always ask people is, "What adjectives do other people use to describe you?" And you were the first guest, and we're approaching 100 guests now. You were the first one that said, "I don't know how people think about me. I don't think about it that way. This is not about me." Can you talk a little bit about what it's like to just always be thinking of other people and not really focused on yourself?
I think it's this, I get so much joy uh, thinking about others and how I can better their lives. Whether it's just by being there, listening to them, or coaching, training them so they can find who they are and their strengths, their passion, moving on with their life. I think that's the best joy that I get out of it. It's just there's nothing so compared to it. It's just having them succeed in life. I think it's because my mom worked a non-profit all her life, and that's what they did.
How does that humility come into play in your work now as you coach young people and youth workers and their craft? How does your humility play into that?
What I see is what matters to them is that I'm really connecting at their level, being there. That's what I realized. This is my degree, my, all those things, accolades. It doesn't mean anything for them. What matters is that I relate to them. And that's the only way I can relate to them. I can't hear them. I can't say to them, yes, I understand. That's how I can be authentic to them and share my own story too. Share my own, my past struggles. Even, at my age now, most of the time they don't think grown-ups have challenges in life. So I can share that with them. But if I can't be, it will be difficult. And youth would know. They sense that. They know. So the only way I can have impact in their life is that way. That's the only.
Yeah. It seems like humility and the ability to be there for them and be present in the moment is what's so critical. And you must make people feel like they're the only ones that matters at the moment that you're talking to them. Has anybody ever said that to you? Is like you feel like you just dumped everything you have into me. Do you ever get that response?
A couple of times, and they wonder why I'm spending so much time I'm giving them, and
Yeah.
they find it's just unbelievable because nobody does that for them. And but it's just that's the best part about doing what I do. I still find time for me and for my family, but at the same time, whenever I find that person, because that's the only time, I don't think I'll ever have a second chance.
Wonderful way to approach it. And you do get so much joy from having that moment with somebody when you feel like you're connected and you're able to allow yourself to focus on what that person is saying to you at that moment. Is that where the joy comes from? That kind of bond or that moment or that time that you have together? Is that where you get all the joy from? Or is it more from watching them progress? Or what is the source of that joy that you get?
When I see them waking up, when I see them saying, aha, this is it, it's because most of the time, as they use, or when I find them, they're questioning their past and potential. They feel trapped by self-doubt and longing for direction and purpose.
Yeah.
So when I see them getting there and then saying, yeah, that's the joy.
Yeah. I share that with you. And from my perspective, there's no better feeling than knowing you're helping somebody else. And so I get that. And I think that that's common to youth workers. Would you say that you see that in other people you work with that do similar kinds of work?
Yes, especially those who've really dedicated themselves to this work. Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah. And if you do dedicate yourself and really put yourself out as that servant to other people, then it seems to just present itself all the time. And it's like an adrenaline rush to have that moment. I also know you're a person of strong faith. Can you talk about your faith and how that comes into how you have decided to live kind of that selfless story that is more about helping others than it is self-serving your own needs?
Yeah, it's about love, and one of the verse that we always use it, right? As love thy neighbor as you love yourself.
Yeah.
So I look at myself, right, and say, I was born in the poorest country in the world, in the poorest place, and I didn't even have a dad. I didn't have all those things people would consider normal, right? I didn't have those kind of things. But still, if I made it, if I'm still here, if I'm still better than where I was, then how come? It, and they can too.
How much of that is rooted in your faith? And how much of that is just a servant mentality? Or can't you separate the two?
It's for me. It's impossible to separate it because every aspect of my life. There is another verse that says, Whosoever wants to be great among you, let him serve. So what I'm given is not just for me to keep. All those things I'm given, I have to share it. I have to give it.
Yeah. Do you feel a sense of disappointment when young people or youth workers that you're coaching are struggling? Do you also feel the downside of that? We talked about the joy, but do you also feel the struggle and the pain, or are you able to kind of separate that out?
I've learned to separate it, but at first I used to be very, disappointed at it. But I understand their side too. It's not that easy to be a youth worker. It can be overwhelming sometimes. It's very demanding. Not everybody can do it.
How do you separate it, Dan? What do you do?
It is an opportunity. Now I started to train youth workers too. So it's an opportunity to make them look into themselves, right? I always say to them, remember, you matter too. There is self-care. Don't wait until you are overwhelmed to the point where you say, I hate my job, or you just do it to get paid. So I go through the same process to start with self. And
These lessons that you've learned throughout your life, the things that your mother has taught you, moving around your community, all those kinds of things. What do you think, like the biggest lesson of your childhood and upbringing was that you learned that you bring into your work now? What is that gift that you got that you now try to give to other people?
selflessness and adaptability. You gotta adapt. Um, Life is always changing. People are always changing, growing. And so I have to adapt.
Selflessness is there. And you talked about love earlier. And I think it's great that you mentioned love. I think we don't talk about that enough. I think it's very acceptable to say that we can love the young people we're working with. And I don't mean that in a cross the boundaries kind of way, but love them for the human being that they are, the humanity in them, and to feel their joy and to feel their sadness as part of this. And do you use the word love with the people that you work with? Do you talk about that, or do you try to keep separation of that language away from your work?
I don't really use that word, but it's just the service that we provide itself, right? The actions, the service, they express love, but like you said, in a healthy manner, right? There is boundaries because there are different kind of loves, but through our actions, through our what we do, we show that.
It's clear that you show that, and you're so grounded and so calm, and you seem so centered. That has come through from the very first second I met you. That calmness must be a big asset that you bring. Would you say that that is one of the things that helps you connect with people, or what is it about you that people develop trust in you?
You're right. It's just I had to accept who I am first. All those people who self-accept, right? They accept themselves, the situation where they are at. It's easy to connect with others. They can relate to them because they understand. But if I don't accept my who I am, my surroundings, or my life, it's going to be very difficult to connect with other people. So that's where the authenticity comes from, right? Especially youth, they sense that when I'm authentic, then they can easily connect with me. It's not how intelligent I am. It's not how educated I am for them. It's just being real. They easily connect with that.
And you're so real. What kind of things keep you up at night when it comes to your service to other people and your willingness to help? What kind of things do you worry about that make it hard for you to relax and get some good night's sleep?
how the next generation is going to be, because I'm raising kids too, and they're going to be part of that. I see, we can't easily say, for instance, it's not going to affect me, it's not going to affect me, right? But we live in a society, the majority actually, right, have, whether it is positive or negative, it's about the majority. So if the majority have been affected, especially the next generation, it's going to affect everybody. So that really worries me. So how are we going to, when I studied how America was founded and all those previous generations, what kind of life they had, the values they had, and that worries me. Are we going back to there, or even better than it was before, or are we going to lose all that?
I share that. And right now it feels like we're kind of up in the air about where we're going to go. And that it does add a level of anxiety into our culture, into our everyday interactions with other people. And I think we all feel that. And especially our young people are feeling that. I have one more question to ask you before we move on and kind of wrap this up. But we started with you grew up without a father, and now you are a dad yourself. Talk about that a little bit. How are you approaching that?
That is a very delicate one. It's because I never thought I was going to get married and have a kid, right? Have kids. But when you fall in love, that you can't predict anything. So when that happens, it's just I had to research, I had to find out, I had to learn from other people. When I learned from other people, even those people who made mistakes, I learned from that mistake. So that's how I approach it. So I'm very cautious. And then the moment, especially my firstborn, my son, when he started to get to that age, when he was 6, 7, I started having that conversation with him. I started, giving you warnings. Now, listen, I didn't have a dad, so don't expect me to be perfect. You might see other kids with a dad and who had a dad, and they understand. But me, I'm just still experimenting. I'm trying to figure it out, and now he's getting it. He's getting it. So I always tell him. I always try to do, to learn from others. I read books and try to do my best. So it's a very delicate one. I don't want to be saying, I'm a dad and that's it. But I'm always learning.
I bet you're going to be a wonderful father. Well, I bet you already are, but I bet you as they continue to grow up, you're going to instill in them really important lessons about humility, lessons about service, and lessons about finding joy in your life and understanding what your purpose is. And you are going to fill that gap that you never had. And it's going to be, I bet you, just a wonderful feeling. Someday you're just going to reach a point and you're going to go, I did a good job with my kids. And I bet you that day is going to come faster than you might imagine. At least I would expect. It's been wonderful getting to know you. And I am so grateful that you agreed to be a guest on the podcast, even though you originally said you might not want to because you don't like to talk about yourself. But I'm glad you did because your story is going to resonate with some people, just like everybody's story does. It just hits some people differently. And I'm so glad that you are doing the work you do to help youth workers find their inner strength and their purpose, and to also do that with young people too. Your ability to bring coaching down to the level of young people is truly a unique way of doing this. And I'm grateful that you are pouring your heart and soul and you're giving it all the love that you have to make it work. So thank you for that. And thank you for being a guest on the Passionate Youth Worker podcast.
Thank you for having me, Paul. I appreciate that.
Ben, before we go, I'd like to leave the guest with the last word. So, what words of wisdom or inspiration would you like to leave with the listeners of this podcast?
Authenticity matters. Be genuine and authentic in your interactions, because you can often sense when someone is not being authentic. So aim to be true to yourself.